And we're really at such an incredibly unique time in the history of the world as a whole, right? Because I mean, it was 500 BC that we started to coin money. It was the a little bit later that we actually like made them fungible in terms of the same size and the same quantity. Then it took another 1,000+ years in order to come up with double entry bookkeeping. And after double entry bookkeeping came up, we had fractional reserve banking. We had a major financial crisis with the Bank of England failing. And guess what happened there? Isaac Newton got put in as master of the mint, and he created the gold standard, right? So then we had the Continental Revolution, we had the French Revolution. Both of these at the core was monetary chaos. You had the continental dollar, which collapsed. You had the French assignat. The John Law got the king to make it illegal to use gold and silver to pay for food. Within a couple weeks, the Reign of Terror drug out 25,000 plus of the political elite in France and cut their heads off with the guillotine. When we have monetary chaos, I mean, look at Venezuela right now. When we have monetary chaos, we have social chaos, we have political chaos, we have financial chaos, we have economic chaos. And Bitcoin came out of this type of chaos. Remember 2007, 2008? Well, it was January 2009 that Bitcoin was birthed. Satoshi released it to the world. And what's in the very first block in the blockchain? It talks about it's a quote from a newspaper article in the Times about the second bailout. Right? So the world right now is in monetary and financial chaos. We have a problem that has no solution. That problem is, I wrote a book about this in 2008 that I published called The Great Credit Contraction. It's now available for free, so anybody can download it. But it talks about how we've gone from 100% commodity money, gold and silver held in your hand, to fiat currency that's now political currency, that's an IOU nothing from an IOU nobody, with fractional reserve banking. So we've created this great credit expansion, and now people are seeking safety and liquidity. They're moving down the liquidity pyramid into stuff that's safer and more liquid. That's why we've seen interest rates on treasury bills go basically to zero. We've seen negative interest rate, zero interest rate policy. We've seen big moves in the monetary metals like gold. And Bitcoin has come out of all of this chaos. And what's interesting about this chaos is that for the first time in hundreds of years, the world is debating what money is and what money's going to be. And it hasn't, we're in the middle of the debate, and we've gone from commodity money to political currency, and now we have something called cryptocurrency. We have blockchain technology. And what I like about the blockchain technology is that you can have digital scarcity that's enforced through the protocol rules. And remember, the money or currency, it's just one application of this blockchain technology. But you can through cryptographic primitives and through mathematical law, you can limit an amount with digital scarcity, the unit of account. So you can get all the benefits of commodity currency. But one of the problems with commodity currency that fiat currency solves is that it's extensible. A gold coin is the same today as it was 2,000 years ago. But what happens when you want to transfer that gold coin over distance? Well, we have to figure out ways to do that over the telegraph and over the telecommunication system. So we come up with things called wire transfers, right? Like that you're actually transferring the money over a physical wire. That's a wire transfer, right? With the telegraph. So fiat currency was able to outcompete, one, because it was extensible, but two, because it was able to get government backing and everything behind it. Well, guess what? Bitcoin and this blockchain technology, it's both limited in amount and it's extensible. And Satoshi, he wrote about this, that we're able to now transfer value over a communications channel. So we're able to take the greatest advancements in all of our telecommunications and IT infrastructure, and then we're able to take all of our advancements in terms of thermodynamics and computer processing and electricity and all of this, and they've found a home in Bitcoin, all these advancements and innovations. And so guess what? The modern day Copernicus, Copernicus, he wrote a treatise on interest before he came up with heliocentric theory. The modern day Isaac Newton's, Isaac Newton developed the gold standard. The modern day Goethe's, Johann von Goethe, highest IQ, highest vocabulary of any human, 90,000 words compared to 30,000 with Shakespeare, who's the next highest. Wrote in his magnum opus, Faust Part 2, he writes about all the deleterious effects that corrupting the monetary unit has on society. Well, guess what? All the polymaths of today, all the Isaac Newtons, all the Goethes, all the Copernicuses, guess what they're working on? Guess what they're working on today? They're working on Bitcoin. Why are they working on Bitcoin? Because that's where the action's at. They're changing the freaking world. And how are they doing it? The world is debating what money is and what money is going to be. And money is so crucial to the operation of society that the wars and revolutions are fought over this on a regular basis, right? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing them being fought right now. Like all of the geopolitical tension, it has its heart and its roots in the failure of Bretton Woods and the failure of the IMF and the WTO. So not only are we reinventing money and we have all this currency and chaos and all this, but it's also right on schedule. If you've read Neil Howe's book, The Fourth Turning, every 80 years we have a fourth turning, right? Because we have these generational cycles. And so we had one at the Constitutional Revolution. 80 years later, we had the Civil War. And each fourth turning, the seeds are laid for it in the previous fourth turning. So like with the Constitutional Revolution, the issue of slavery was not solved, right? And so that laid the seeds for the next fourth turning with the Civil War. But also out of the Civil War, we had a massive consolidation of the U.S. federal bank, the U.S. banking industry and the currency industries. We had 40, 50,000 plus private currencies before the Civil War. But, we consolidated all of these into greenbacks and the federal banking system. 80 years later, we had World War II. We had the failure of the gold exchange standard because of political meddling. So the British and then FDR, making gold illegal with Executive Order 6203, him and Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini, they all made gold illegal, because that's what tyrants do. Because when you have this currency and this chaos and this crisis, you get two choices. You get regeneration or repression. And so the Constitutional Revolution, there was regeneration. The Civil War, there was repression. World War II, there was repression. And now we're 80 years later. We're in the middle of this next great fourth turning. Are we going to have massive global war, probably nuclear? I don't necessarily think so. But we are going to have craziness when it comes to the monetary and the financial areas. And that's what we're doing. As a society and as a species, we're reinventing what money is using the latest technology. It's going to be the largest wealth transfer ever in the history of the world. And yeah, it's a social experiment. You're seeing it play out right now, real time. And it's so exciting to be a part of.
Oh, indeed. Trace, can governments adopt a cryptographic layer to their payment system and obviously crush the ecosystem, which works outside the government, by competing with it head on? Because most people would rather have their funds, what they feel right now, are secured and insured somehow by a government rather than a non-entity. If there's a nowhere to turn fear that you could lose your coins due to either exchanges shutting down, losing a code, or accidentally sending your coins to the wrong address, what are your thoughts on these matters?
Well, what people are you talking about? The people in Venezuela? The people in Turkey? The people in China? What people are you talking about that really trust their governments? Really, right? Like government, how many government currencies are in the fiat currency graveyard? I mean, it's just a matter of time before governments screw stuff up politically because they don't have the ability to perform economic calculation. You know, Hayek wrote about this and Mises. They don't have the ability to perform economic calculation, so they misallocate capital. We've had over 20 governments that have nationalized pension in this financial crisis. How many millions of lifetimes of savings are going to be, you know, nationalized and stolen and misallocated and wasted? I mean, how many millennials actually believe that Social Security is going to pay out for them?
Right.
Okay, so you're going, not only are you going to trust them with your retirement accounts, but you're also going to trust them with your money? And that's where Bitcoin or things like it actually become like a release valve, because there are people that trust the status quo. You know, there are people who have first world problems. You know, they trust the status quo. They live in Sweden, or they live in the UK, or they live in the United States. They have access to financial services. I mean, right now it costs more to have a bank account in most African countries than your cell phone costs for your annual payment every year. Yeah, and guess what? You can download a free Bitcoin application on your cell phone, and now you've got a bank on your cell phone that doesn't cost any money every month. And so Nigeria is one of the countries that has massive Bitcoin adoption going on right now. Why?
That is so wild and crazy.
Why? Because it's super cheap. You get financial services. You don't have to pay for them. It's move the free line, so it's cheaper. And guess what? Nigeria, who wants to trust Nigeria with their money? Oh, they've got a great track record, right?
Right.
And so yeah, there are people who trust, you know, the government institutions, and they can allocate their capital there. But one thing we've found is that capital goes where it's treated best, right? And what's interesting about Bitcoin is that it's totally opt-in. You know, Bitcoin doesn't have, this is legal tender for all debts, public and private, like stamped on it, right? Like dollars. This was one of the problems with the Continental Revolution, is that debtors would pay creditors, quote, without mercy, right? Like, you lend somebody money and they pay you back with something that's worthless. Yeah, that's a great deal. Well, that's what these legal tender laws do, is that they force you through court judgment or court order to accept the particular legal tender in payment for a debt, regardless of what the value of that legal tender is. And so, you know, as long as the legal tender has some degree of value to it, then it's just fine. But even in the United States, which is the center, the world reserve currency, we just had a case 3-4 years ago where somebody had lent money. This was like 80, 90 years ago. The debt was denominated in gold. And so the issue was whether the people that they had lent the money to had to repay gold, had to repay value at $1,200 an ounce or at $30 an ounce, right? Mm-hmm. And so the person who lent the money with this long-term contract over like 80 years, they got totally screwed because they had lent it at $30 an ounce and they got paid back at $1,200 an ounce. You know, so even in the United States, people are getting screwed, like with the money. And, you know, inflation, there's no limit on the amount that the Federal Reserve can print, but there's a limit on the number of Bitcoins, right? And so Japan is another good example of this. They just legalized Bitcoin in a big way, went into effect July 1st. So what, you know, now people can borrow yen, which are not limited in amount, and the government wants to actively devalue, they can borrow yen and they can buy Bitcoin, like a yen Bitcoin carry trade. So Bitcoin becomes like a black hole that begins just sucking in the capital that's in the world. And it sucks in the capital the more that the people don't trust the capital that's on the other side. So, you know, whether it sucks in 0.001% of total global wealth or whether it sucks in 10% of total global wealth, what it does is it changes the rules of the chessboard for people allocating capital, because they now have a safe place to store their money. So it acts as a check and balance against the political currency and the laws in different places. In effect, it changes the risk-free rate of return, because it's like, oh, well, my money's safe in Bitcoin, so since it's safe in Bitcoin, I guess I'll keep it in my IRA because I feel that the chance that the government's going to nationalize it and they're going to tax it and like do all this stuff, I feel that compensates for the change in return, and so the return from keeping it there justifies the risk of not like moving it out into Bitcoin, right?
Right. The fear versus fear. Do you fear the government, which obviously has a history of taking all of our money and devaluing everything, or do you fear yourself losing your Bitcoins?
Bitcoin's not for the faint of heart, because you literally, if you're doing Bitcoin the right way, you literally take possession of the private keys. And the private key is just a number, and that number enables you to solve a math problem, right? So the Bitcoin is a new form of code. It's a new form of property rights. It's property rights that aren't defined by legal code, but instead by mathematical code. And that means that individuals can hold the number themselves. Wealth has now been reduced to a number, right? So we're talking about portability, we're talking about durability. I mean, there are Bitcoin addresses out there that have $100 million in it. And the people that are storing value in there, they don't have to pay storage fees. Like with gold, they don't have to pay insurance, vaulting, like they don't have to pay bank fees, right? I mean, this is revolutionary. And then anywhere they can send that number, or they can back up the number in multiple places. They can use clever math to split the number up into like 3 of 5 pieces or something like that, and then store those in different places, so you can have all the segregation of duties and checks and balances when it comes to moving the funds. But at the end of the day, we've reduced wealth to a mere number, and that becomes the ultimate form of portability. You could actually store that number just in your head, right? And like then you're walking across borders or whatever. It's not like you've got a whole bunch of gold that you got to go through an X-ray machine with.
Right.
And so it makes it. Oh, and it changes. It also changes kind of the incentive structure, because somebody can kill you and take your gold. And there have been wars fought over this. Like, just look at what happened to the Inca Empire, right? But they can't just kill you and take your Bitcoin. They actually got to get that number.
That's
right?
Such a good point. If the numbers
and so like if they can't
nothing to take.
Like, if you're worth more alive than dead, then you might stay alive. I mean, like, yeah. So Bitcoin's a whole new animal, and the money, the currency aspect of it is just one application. I mean, it changes the whole way we establish trust. So right now, we're able to go look at LinkedIn and we see people and they say, oh, I have a degree from here, I have this work experience or whatever, right? We don't actually know. Like, that's just an assertion. Like, where's the foundation? With Bitcoin, you're going to be able to have a degree that's been signed by private keys of Harvard or Stanford. Right? And so you're going to be able to go to LinkedIn and you'll be able to cryptographically prove that somebody has that degree, or that title to a car belongs to somebody or whatever. You'll be able to cryptographically prove it with click of a mouse, just instantly. And so, it's going to open up all new forms of ways that we establish trust in the world. And isn't that ultimately what money and finance and property rights and all this stuff, isn't that ultimately what it's all about? It's about trust.
Absolutely.
I mean, you even brought it up, like people trusting government. Well, why trust government? Why not trust computer code and remove the need to trust any type of humans or whatever to the extent possible? Let's remove to the maximum extent possible any particular wet code, and what I mean by wet code is code that runs on the brain of a lawyer or a judge or a politician, and instead trust, software code. So we trust the software code as much as absolutely possible, which can be open source. Everybody can review it. Everybody has access to all the source code all the time. So we all know what this code is doing and how it's executing. And so we trust that as much as possible and minimize any wet code to the maximum amount possible. And then that enables us to trust more people and trust more people faster and easier and everything like that. So we get greater social scalability in terms of who we can interact with and trade with in our daily lives. In other words, our refrigerator can be trusting, Whole Foods, which can be trusting Instacart or whatever, and it just reorders the food and pays for it automatically, and it gets delivered and by the drone or whatever and put in the fridge, and like you're not having to trust anybody, and like so many of these daily tasks are all automated. And yet rooted in the foundation of all this trust, where we root that trust is probably going to be in the Bitcoin blockchain, because it will be so far it has been immutable, meaning you can't go back and change it. And it's the only blockchain that's achieved liquidity, scalability, and security all at the same time. And it has all the network effects going for it, regardless of, its problems or everybody like arguing and trying to hash stuff out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's where it's all happening. And that's why people are arguing over it and about it and around it and all this stuff, is because they understand, like, this is where it's all going down. This is the Mount Everest where everybody's climbing. And so, the people getting up the mountain the fastest, guess what? They're the smartest people in the world. They're the Isaac Newtons, the Gutas, etc. And they're building something that a lot of them are ideologically motivated with this, right? They have a long history of wanting to build stuff that empowers the individual, again, as opposed to empowering the state. And so, that's kind of fun to watch also.